Welcome to Storytelling and Beyond, where every story touches the heart and reminds us of the power of humanity. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and join our growing family of listeners who believe in kindness, compassion, and the beauty of everyday heroes. It had been the kind of day that leaves a quiet ache in your chest. The kind of day where the world doesn't end, but something inside you shifts. Emma Carter walked slowly down the long, tiled hallway of Mercy General Hospital, her nurse's badge dangling from her lanyard like a piece of a life that no longer belonged to her. She had always believed that nursing wasn't just a job, it was a calling. A promise to show up, to care, to hold a trembling hand even when no one else would. But today, that promise had been taken from her. Budget cuts, the administrator had said, eyes barely meeting hers. Nothing personal. You've been wonderful. Wonderful. As if being wonderful could pay the bills. Emma had cleared out her locker in silence, her colleagues offering awkward goodbyes and quick hugs before hurrying off to their shifts. No one had time for long farewells in a hospital. Life moved on even if yours had just paused. Outside, the late afternoon sun was sinking, casting a golden glow over the city. Emma stepped onto the busier than usual sidewalk, clutching a small cardboard box filled with a few photos, her scrubs, and the stethoscope she'd worn around her neck for over a decade. She didn't know where she was going, just that she couldn't go home yet. Not to the silence of her small apartment, not to the ticking of the clock reminding her she was suddenly unemployed. She decided to walk. The city hummed around her, car horns, street vendors calling out, children laughing in a nearby park. And then, just as she was about to cross an intersection near a bus stop, she heard it, a soft thud, like something or someone falling. Emma turned quickly. An elderly man had collapsed on the pavement, his body twisted awkwardly, one hand clutched tightly against his chest. People stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Some pulled out their phones. No one moved. But Emma did. She dropped her box and ran to his side, instinct overriding everything else. Kneeling beside him, she checked his breathing, his pulse weak, but there. His face was pale, drenched in sweat. A heart issue, maybe. Dehydration. Fatigue. She didn't know yet. But she didn't hesitate. "I'm a nurse," she said loudly, more to the crowd than to him. "Someone call 911 now." Her hands moved without thought, checking vitals, loosening his collar, elevating his legs slightly. She spoke softly to him as she worked. "You're going to be okay. I've got you. You're not alone." He opened his eyes briefly, tried to speak, then squeezed her hand. His grip was weak, but full of trust. The ambulance came within minutes, though it felt like hours. When the EMTs arrived and lifted him onto the stretcher, one of them turned to Emma and said, "You probably saved his life." Emma nodded, but her mind was somewhere else. She watched as they loaded the man into the ambulance and disappeared into the city's pulse. She didn't know his name. Didn't expect to ever see him again. She had only done what she was trained to do, what she was made to do. But life, as she was about to learn, had just begun writing a brand new chapter. The sun had dipped below the skyline, casting a lavender hue over the city streets. Emma stood where the ambulance had just left moments before, the silence settling heavier now that the chaos was over. Her hands still trembled, not from fear, but from adrenaline. Even though she no longer wore the hospital badge, her heart hadn't forgotten how to respond. She had done what any nurse would have done. What she hoped someone would do for her father, if he ever needed it. She gathered the small box she had dropped, now slightly cracked at the corner, and began walking again. She didn't make it far before she heard someone call out behind her. "Ma'am! Wait!" She turned to see a paramedic jogging up the street toward her. He looked young, probably new to the job, his uniform still crisp. In his hand was a folded brown wallet. He dropped this. "You should have it," the paramedic said, catching his breath. "You saved him. Figured you'd want to know who he was." Emma hesitated, then accepted it. The leather was old, worn with time, edges fraying. Inside, along with a few dollar bills and an outdated bus pass, was an old military ID. She unfolded it carefully. Thomas E. Whitaker. United States Army. Retired. Alongside it was a photo, black and white, clearly from decades ago. A young man in uniform, eyes filled with intensity and purpose. There was also a folded piece of paper behind the photo. A list of medications, scribbled by hand, and at the bottom, an address. The man she had just helped wasn't just an elderly passerby. He was a decorated veteran. A man who had likely faced battles she could never imagine and was now quietly struggling to make it through a city that had almost forgotten him. Emma felt something stir in her chest. It wasn't pity. It was connection. She stood there for a while, cars passing, people walking by, unaware that her world had just nudged slightly off course. She had nowhere to be now. No job to rush to. No evening shift waiting. Her hands still smelled faintly of antiseptic, a reminder that her skills still mattered. She looked back down at the wallet, at the address scribbled on the slip of paper. It wasn't far. Maybe 15 minutes on foot. Maybe she could just check in. Not as a nurse. Not as an employee. But as a human being. She took a deep breath and started walking. The streets seemed quieter now, each step echoing louder in her mind. She didn't know what she'd find, or even if he'd be there. But for some reason, she felt compelled. Something about that man's eyes. Something about the way he had squeezed her hand. It didn't feel like the end of something. It felt like the beginning. The building was old red brick, its walls weathered by time, with narrow windows and a rusted fire escape winding down the side. Emma stood on the sidewalk, looking up at the faded number painted above the entrance. 1342, Westbridge Avenue. It matched the address in the wallet. She felt a strange mix of nerves and purpose ripple through her as she walked up the concrete steps. Inside, the hallway smelled faintly of old wood and boiled cabbage. A flickering light buzzed overhead. She climbed the stairs slowly, her footsteps echoing on the worn linoleum. On the third floor, she found apartment 3B. The door was slightly ajar, as if someone had left in a hurry. She knocked softly, then pushed the door open just enough to peek in. It was empty. Not abandoned, just lived in and quiet. A small armchair by the window. A thin blanket folded on the couch. A framed photo of a much younger Thomas in uniform sat proudly on the mantel. The place was clean but humble. On the coffee table sat a pair of reading glasses and a half-read newspaper. Next to it was a stack of medical bills, neatly organized but clearly unpaid. Emma's heart sank a little. She didn't mean to pry, but she couldn't help noticing how meticulously everything was arranged. A man who lived with discipline. A man used to order, to structure, even if life now offered him none. Her eyes landed on a shadow box hanging on the wall, military medals, aged ribbons, and a small American flag folded into a triangle. She stepped closer, reading the brass plate beneath it. Staff Sergeant Thomas E. Whitaker, honored for valor in service. Her breath caught slightly. All this time, she had passed people on the street, helped strangers in the ER, and never once thought about what stories lay behind tired eyes or trembling hands. This man had once served his country with courage, and now he was walking alone to a free clinic, collapsing on a sidewalk, and living in quiet solitude. She gently set the wallet on the coffee table and stood there for a moment, taking in the stillness. She didn't touch anything else. Just left a small note on top of the wallet. "You're not alone. Emma." On her way out, she stopped by the front desk in the lobby to ask the elderly attendant if anyone would be checking on Mr. Whitaker. The woman nodded kindly and said, "He usually comes back from his VA appointments around nightfall." Emma thanked her, stepped back into the cold evening air, and made her way home. But something strange happened when she got there. She had just taken off her shoes and poured herself a glass of water when she heard the rumble of engines outside. It wasn't the sound of ordinary cars. She peeked through the blinds. 4 black military SUVs were pulling up in front of her building, one by one. Uniformed men stepped out, their movements calm and precise. And they were walking toward her door. Emma froze, glass in hand, heart racing.
She hadn't even told anyone her name. She hadn't called anyone. But somehow, they knew. There was a soft knock at the door. Not hurried. Not aggressive. Just firm. Purposeful. Emma stood still, the glass still in her hand, her breath shallow. The knock came again, this time followed by a calm voice. "Miss Emma Carter? We'd like a word with you." She slowly walked to the door and opened it, just enough to see the men standing there. 4 of them. All in formal military dress. Not soldiers on patrol, these men were officials. Their uniforms were crisp, their expressions serious but not unkind. One of them, older than the others and clearly in charge, stepped forward and offered a polite nod. "Miss Carter, may we come in? We promise this won't take long." Emma hesitated for a second, then stepped aside. They entered respectfully, removing their caps as they crossed the threshold. The man who had spoken handed her a sealed folder. Her name was printed on the front in bold letters. "We represent the Office of Veteran Affairs and the U.S. Army Reserve," he began. "Earlier today, you assisted one of our most decorated veterans, Staff Sergeant Thomas E. Whitaker. Your actions were not only noticed, they were recorded." Emma looked up, confused. "Recorded?" The man nodded and smiled gently. "Mr. Whitaker has a military-issued emergency alert device on his person at all times. It activates in cases of distress and sends a location signal. But it also records audio and video. Standard for some of our older veterans who live alone, just in case." He paused, watching her carefully. "We've reviewed the footage. From the moment you reached him, to the way you spoke to him, cared for him, without hesitation, without recognition, without even knowing his name. What you did today, it moved a lot of people." Emma didn't know what to say. Her throat tightened. We often see stories of veterans struggling, people walking past, ignoring them. But today, you stopped. And because of that, Sergeant Whitaker is stable, recovering, and asking for you. One of the younger officers stepped forward and opened the folder in her hand. Inside was an award certificate, signed and sealed, recognizing her for humanitarian service to the U.S. Armed Forces. And beneath it, a letter of offer. It was from a specialized veterans hospital in upstate New York. A position. Full-time. Housing provided. Competitive salary. Flexible schedule. Emma's voice was a whisper. "I don't understand. Why me?" The lead officer looked her in the eyes. "Because in a world moving too fast to care, you remembered how to stop. You remembered what it means to serve, even when you didn't have a job, or a reason to. That's what we value. That's what our veterans need." He handed her one final envelope. "Mr. Whitaker asked that we give you this personally." They turned to leave, as calmly as they had come, disappearing into the night like shadows of a world most never see. Emma sat down, her hands trembling, and opened the envelope. Inside was a simple note written in a shaky hand. "You saved me. Let us do the same for you." She covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. And for the first time in days, she didn't feel lost. She felt found. The early morning sun poured through the tall windows of the Veterans Hospital like a gentle promise. A light breeze passed through the courtyard, where trimmed hedges and American flags stood with quiet dignity. On a bench beneath the large oak tree sat Thomas Whitaker, dressed neatly in his pressed cardigan and slacks, a military cap resting in his lap. His eyes scanned the entrance with the calm patience of a soldier who knew the value of waiting. The doors opened. Emma Carter stepped outside, wearing her new uniform, a soft blue nurse's jacket bearing the insignia of the Veterans Medical Center. Her ID badge clipped neatly near her heart, her steps sure, her face peaceful in a way it hadn't been in weeks. Thomas saw her before she saw him, and the moment he did, his lined face broke into a slow, proud smile. Emma approached the bench, and for a second, they simply looked at each other. "You're looking sharper than the last time I saw you," she said with a playful smile. He chuckled, a dry, warm sound. "And you, young lady, look like someone who finally landed right where she was meant to be."
She sat beside him, hands folded neatly in her lap. For a while, they just watched the trees sway, the sunlight dance across the grass. There was a quiet comfort between them, one born not of long history, but of something deeper. The bond between the saved and the Savior. "Did you mean it?" she asked softly. "What you wrote in that note?" He looked at her, his eyes clear despite their age. "Every word. You gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time. Dignity. Someone who saw me as more than an old man with a cane." Emma swallowed the lump rising in her throat. "You gave me something too. I lost everything that morning, my job, my purpose. But when I saw you there on the sidewalk, something in me woke up. Like the universe was reminding me that my worth wasn't tied to a hospital badge or a paycheck." Thomas nodded. "Service doesn't end when the uniform comes off. And it doesn't start with a title. It starts with the heart." Across the courtyard, a few other veterans waved to Emma. Some in wheelchairs, others walking slowly with canes or prosthetics. She waved back, recognizing their faces from the rounds she had started doing just days ago. Already, her presence was being felt. Already, they trusted her. Thomas leaned back, lifting his face toward the sky. "You know, there are 1,000 ways to leave a mark in this world. But the deepest ones? They're the quiet acts of kindness. The things no one asks you to do. The moments where you stop for a stranger and give them your hand." Emma looked around this place, this quiet, sacred space where stories lived in silence, stitched into the fabric of each patient's life. And for the first time in a long while, she felt not just needed, but rooted. She turned back to Thomas. "I think I found my place." He smiled, slowly placing his cap back on his head. "You didn't find it, Emma. You built it, one choice at a time." The two of them sat a while longer, watching the sun climb higher, casting golden warmth over the facility, as if the day itself was applauding the quiet miracle that had unfolded. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, breathing it in, this peace, this new beginning born not from luck, but from compassion. And far away in the background, behind the tall gates of the hospital, the world moved on. But here, in this corner of it, something had changed. A nurse found her path again. A veteran found dignity in a stranger's hands. And a simple act of kindness had rewritten both of their stories. Thank you for listening to today's story on Storytelling and Beyond, where ordinary people find extraordinary strength through love, humanity, and compassion. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We post heartfelt, emotional stories that remind us all what it means to care and to be cared for. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that could move your soul. Until next time, take care of each other and keep believing in the power of kindness.